I can.
All right, here we go.
Live. Okay, I see the live sign. Hi, I'm Verena, and I'd love to know who else is in the room. That would be
I'm Melissa.
Melissa. And what? I guess I'm curious. Why are you here today? So what brought you here today?
Actually, one of the people that was putting the conference or the unconference together actually works at my school. I'm the media specialist at Windsor Locks High School.
Excellent. Anyone else?
My name is Julie, and I'm a school librarian at Cromwell High School.
Great.
I'm going to learn a few things today.
And Melissa? Hi.
Frank Lopes. My wife was telling me a little about this conference, and I'm the digital literacy teacher at middle school, and just interested in finding out more about that.
And I'm Greg McVeary. I'm here to basically troll.
Well, yeah, with me you are, yeah, for sure, Greg. Well, awesome. Welcome this morning. It's a bit earlier for me. I'm from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And I was just saying there's a lot of snow outside my window this morning. So I'm here because Ian made me come. There you go. But I was just blogging last night, and I haven't blogged in a long, long time. And I was thinking about the reason I wrote this blog post is from all the collaboration that I've been doing in online environments. And that's with talking with Ian, talking with Greg as it happens, talking with all sorts of people in Google Hangouts. Does anyone do that on a regular basis? Connect with random educators online in Google Hangouts, or other than today, go to web conferences, online web conferences. Have you ever heard of what I'm talking about?
Well, yesterday I was just fooling around on wasting time on Google+. Well, it's not really a time waster. And then I saw Martin Hoxie and Alan Levine of DS106 fame.
Yeah.
And they were doing a whole presentation on how to use WordPress for open learning. They were just talking amongst themselves, but it was an HOA. So I was able to hop on, watch it, get on Twitter, talk to them back and forth and then gentleman named Boone, who actually, for those who know WordPress, he created this thing called BuddyPress. He saw it too, and then he hopped on and explained how he builds he basically is a WordPress guru. So it was really interesting to watch as the expertise became distributed.
Bigger and bigger.
That was my little Google Hangouts on Air story from yesterday.
Yeah, and that's just from yesterday. Yeah. So the point is, there's actually all these random conversations going on about things that you could be really interested in, and it's just about finding out where they are and where they're happening. I guess that's the first thing, being included in that process. And how do you do that? And I think, Greg, you figured it out through Twitter. Is that right?
No, it just showed up in my feed because I just
in your Google feed. Okay, yeah.
Martin. And so it said, oh, he's doing a Hangout on Air right now, and so I just clicked on it and watched the YouTube video live.
Yeah. Now, from a scary point of view, from a teacher point of view, kids would be doing this as well all the time. And Don Wettrick, he is an innovative teacher in, where is he, Franklin. He goes to Franklin School in, I think it's in Indiana. He and I were experimenting with Google Hangouts, and we left it completely open, just like we said, and all we were doing was talking in it about the potential for kids in the future, and a random 11-year-old jumped in and started talking to us, and also random other people jumped in, and one person was naked, for example, and then we learned how to block them.
Yeah, well, the 11-year-old shouldn't be on.
But then we thought about the 11-year-old, and then we thought, wait a second, we can't even be on this Google Hangout with an 11-year-old as educators because of FERPA and the under 30, let alone under 18. But we did ask him before we left. I said, well, why are you doing this? He's like, well, I'm at home, I'm bored. I've been doing it all the time. So that intrigued us even more. To ensure that we learn about this in school. And we learn about why you might not want to just randomly jump into a Google Hangout. And yes, we were really safe. We were two educators talking about Google Hangouts. They're very boring. And that's why we didn't even understand why a random 11-year-old would jump in. But the thing is, they're doing it anyway. But they're doing it in a wide variety of ways. And while Greg jumped into a great conversation about WordPress, these kids are jumping into conversations all over the world. How do we give them the skills to encourage them to think about what Howard Weingold calls crap detection, what is actually relevant, what's not, what's credible? How do we develop those skills? How do we develop search skills? How do we develop digital literacy? So, do you have access to my PowerPoint? Because I don't really want to disappear.
Why don't you share your screen, Verena, but don't go into full screen. Oh, you're on PC, right?
Yeah. Do I have that option?
You could go full screen, but do you have is it a PowerPoint or a Google presentation?
Just Google presentation.
Yeah, just over on your left. Bring your cursor over to your left till your toolbar pops up.
Uh-huh.
And you see a little thing, like it's a green square that looks like with an arrow in it.
Oh, yeah, that's the screen share. That's what you just kind of do.
Yep,
Yeah.
and then just choose the window with your presentation.
Oh yeah, no, you're funny. I was doing that, but then my head gets lost. But that's okay.
No, you can toggle back and forth for us.
Oh, okay, that's what you're thinking. Okay, well, I'm trying to figure out what you're thinking in your head, and what I'm thinking, and that's what happens online too.
I'm trying to figure out what's in my head.
Yeah, apparently not. So today we're going to talk about emerging trends and mostly what I've been doing to try to give you some ideas. Can you see this now?
Yes.
Okay. So as I said, my name is Verena Roberts. I'm the current Innovative and K-12 Innovative Practice Award recipient for iNACOL. And why is that important? Well, in the United States, it's really important because awards are really important. In Canada, not many people know what iNACOL is, so it's not as important. But the big thing about it is that I got it for work doing open learning. And that meant that I basically created a school and created courses and created practice ideas that encourage open learning. And that openness that I'm referring to is what we were just talking about. Random connections online where you can develop learning, not the negative ones, although the negative things happen as well. So we'll talk a bit about that, but how you learn from them. But how we meet and how we encourage our high school students in particular to meet online and collaborate online in networks, which takes a lot of risk-taking, you'd think, but the biggest thing is you give up your control. And then when you give up your control, I can say now, the students end up telling you exactly where they are and what they've been up to and what they're doing because they're so proud of themselves and they're so excited that you let them go. So in general, that's what happens. So over the last 2 years, I've been examining what's called MOOCs. I'm going back and forth toggling here. Have you heard of MOOCs before? MOOCs? Nodding.
Yeah.
Everybody's nodding.
Yeah.
Nodding, thank you, Greg. So they're massive open online courses, but immediately I did not follow what's called a CMOOC, and I distinguished that by calling it a cash MOOC because it did not meet the pedagogical practice needs of K-12, in my opinion. Like, how are we going to rethink learning in K-12? So what we're talking about today is what's called the XMOOC more than anything. So I took ideas from the XMOOC, which is more of a community-based, based on connections and interactions like we're talking about, and developed ideas. The first thing I did was created 3 MOOCs over the year. The first one was led by teachers for high school students, and the way I did it was I asked high school students what they wanted to learn about, and they said anything but Facebook. So we decided to ask them, well, what does that mean? And they said blogging. They really wanted to learn how to blog. So over 3 days, we had students come together in groups online. We created these groups originally. So that's one thing that's already changed. Most MOOCs, XMOOCs, encourage you to randomly connect and find your support networks. we already knew that we needed to scaffold something different for high school students. So we created the groups, and then we said, can you create a blog together and then send it out to the world? And they did, and it was exciting. But the most exciting part of that was that we had 7 teachers to 3 student ratio because we were so scared something would go wrong. And we had them all sign up into Google Docs, and we were waiting for them to work in Google Docs. And the 7 teachers, you know, in Google Docs you can see at the top, you can see when people are sitting there in the top corner. Well, 7 teachers waited for 9 hours at the top corner of these Google Docs, and nothing went in the Google Doc. And at the end of the 9 hours, so we thought the whole thing was, you know, done. As it turned out, the kids were out learning in their own way. They were using Etherpads, or they were using Instagram. They were using all sorts of things to learn, and then they clicked and put all that knowledge and all that learning into one link into the Google Doc and told us what they've been doing for the last 9 hours. And we laughed because as teachers, I call us silly teachers, we didn't trust that they were doing anything. But in reality, they were completely learning and working hard and evaluating. And the best thing from a digital data point of view is we could track and see who said what, who did what, because they loved texting. So they used all sorts of texting tools, and they just put it all into this Google document. So we got to see how they learned. But MOOCs really are just one part of the open kind of process. So when we think of like the open classroom model, you have to think of constructivism. It's student created. You have to think of asynchronous and synchronous, so options where you have face-to-face in online environments and let them go and do their own thing. Has to be open, collaborative, cooperative, inquiry-based. It needs to be focused on competency rather than formal traditional assessment practices in general, in my opinion. Badges, open badges in particular, gamification, the design, intergenerational, interdisciplinary, including Rise, Bloom's taxonomy, connectivist.
Come on, get one more buzzword in there. You can do it.
Yeah, I know. The reason but I needed to put them all in there because we argue in education that we can't do this, but it happens by just creating a blog and sending it out to the world as a group. We covered all that, and I only did that as a 3-day MOOC, as I say. I watch you and then I come back. It's kind of funny. It's like I'm observing you. Anyway, I came up with the idea: connect, collaborate, create. Because for teachers, we need to be basic, and for kids, we need to be basic. Everyone needs to be basic. So if we connect at the beginning, when we do something together, we take that first step, and then we create something on our own, you meet all those needs.
It's not working.
I'm going to stop on the next one. Now, I'm hoping you're asking or thinking to yourself, how can I do this with 6-year-olds? And why would I let my 6-year-olds go out and into massive open spaces and do what they want? And the answer is I would not suggest that at all. I think this is where you have the teacher-led activities in the walled garden up to about grade 6 or grade 5. And then the transition period is in the walled garden towards autonomous open learning happens right when they start getting their cell phones, which is statistically about grade 5 or 6. That doesn't mean that you still do open activities, which means we still can't use, I'm not saying we use Facebook, but as an example, we can't use anything like Facebook or Twitter until they're 13 or over anyway legally. So we still start doing things as teachers, modeling it. They use our accounts, we're watching them. And then by the age of 14, they are already learning in an autonomous open learning environment, and so we encourage that. Do you have any questions so far?
Actually, can you put your presentation on presentation mode so we can see the slides better?
You should be able to on a PC. On a Mac, when you're in Hangouts on Air, you can't go into presentation mode for some reason.
Oh, okay.
But she's on a PC, so you might be able to, Verena.
Yeah, I should.
If you go into
find my
page with the board,
yeah.
if you go in, then there's a link to
Okay.
The-
I'm
the
having trouble
sign-up
getting
sheet.
onto that board. It keeps on timing out on my.
Yeah, on my end it's going
Oh,
real
okay.
slow too.
Yeah.
All right, sorry.
Where's my where's presentation and what
There's
time is my?
the little triangle up in the right-hand top corner.
Oh, that's why I can't find it. Thanks. Okay. So these are the key characteristics or considerations when you're creating any kind of open learning environment. Little ones like 3 days or
Yeah,
all
can you
year
talk about
round.
the time, like, because most MOOCs that people are familiar with are these, like, 9-week extravaganzas.
No.
How is it?
Good.
How did 3
Yeah.
days work in open learning with younger students doing these little kind of 3-day mini events?
Well, the reason I went to a 3-day mini event was because did you do MOOC, Greg? Did you?
What?
Did you do MOOC, the course MOOC? Okay, so it was 1 week.
Sorry, there's
And
a
it-
little sarcasm there.
I know, I heard that.
Yeah, so it was 1 week, and it was with adults. And what I learned was when you're engaged in a project, and when we're engaged in a project in a face-to-face world too, yes, we have to develop trust. Yes, we have to develop relationships. Actually, that's absolutely fundamental first, and we'll talk about that a bit more. And so it doesn't work. These projects don't work unless you've developed trust and some kind of relationships. But once you get into that mode that we all talk about, the proximal zone of learning, and the kids really get there because they're so focused on getting this project done, the timing could be even less. So it depends if the trust and relationships are developed or not. That will take you the longest in this project, this kind of project, or this kind of MOOC, this kind of idea for K-12. Does that help, Greg?
I just want to. I thought that was a pretty innovative approach that you did by doing these kind of short learning.
Yeah. I wouldn't suggest long at all for high school students, or actually any real students. It's kind of like the Genius Hour approach. You do that once a week. The same thing. We go in, we do it, and then we come out. Because to be totally honest, I don't know if the teachers in the room, because I can't see right now, have done any inquiry-based learning, but the kids are exhausted by the learning when you're doing an inquiry-based approach. So we want to give them a break. Their brains hurt when they do this kind of learning, which is awesome, but we have to be realistic. So the idea is thinking about learning pathways and integrating formal and informal learning to create a common learning currency. So how do we take what they're learning?
Learning pathways for the audience?
Pardon me? Define?
Define, yeah. What's a learning pathway?
A learning pathway is an individualized or personalized approach to learning. So it's the way each learner learns by themselves, and it's going to be different. Everyone's going to take their own path or their own journey. And the way to do that, as I'm suggesting here, is you have to integrate what's going on in the classroom and what they're passionate about and doing outside of the classroom as well. If we combine the two of them, then we're going to create one common way to learn. Now, in our traditional formal, this is hard. I can't see you guys when I do this one, so I can't see your face.
Click on your bottom screen, Verena. You could always toggle to us.
But I can't when it's open in presentation, I've just learned.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'll just go.
Go back to your other view.
Yeah, now I'm going to go
and then
back.
make your sidebar smaller and your window bigger.
Oh, there you go.
So you can turn off your screen share.
So does that make sense? That's what I was asking. So it's about trying to bring in what they're doing outside into the inside world. And how do we track that individually? How do we assess that individually? We're going to have to think about everything differently. So we can't have one common rubric. We can't have standardized tests. We can have tests based on skills because those skills are developed within their own learning pathways. They're all doing it different ways. Right? I'm not seeing any nods or... Yeah, just kidding. Okay, I'm trying to get through this to stop talking so I can get more questions. Oh, you can't see this. So, I did a whole bunch of research on what that would look like, and so I'll just tell you what I learned, what the main topics were. the key thing is there's a lack of trust between higher ed and K-12 in industry and community. So when I studied and tried to promote informal and formal learning, people started saying, well, that's nice, that's a great idea for me to work with a company or me to work with a university, but I don't trust them. They always tell me what to do, or they want to do it their own way. And I did very informal. The whole idea was just to do an informal study to see how we could start developing these ideas, because as teachers, we cannot do this by ourselves. There's no way. We don't have the expertise to do it, so we need more support and help. And so to have lack of trust means nothing was really progressing, and nothing will happen unless we build on that trust. Competency-based learning is really essential, because competencies, in my research, I actually had to study what a competency was. In the US in particular, they often compare competencies to standard-based learning or outcome-based learning. In reality, competencies, if we look internationally, like compare Europe, Canada as well, they're based on skills, behaviors, attitudes, as well as your knowledge. So how do you test for that? How do you test for a certain behavior? How do you test for a certain attitude? That's not going to work very well either in our standardized test society. So it's coming up with activities and things like open badges that can help support what that would look like from a criteria point of view, an evidence point of view, how to get the kids showing things like digital citizenship or ethical citizenship. We have to think of e-portfolios. We have to think outside the box. And in that way, you'll be able to encourage them to devote time to what they're passionate about and connect it to the formal environment. I'm going to click through these.
I'm not looking at your slides, just to let you know.
I know, so that I'm simping of them. I want just to get to questions. So,
tell us a little bit, you also did for adult learners that Learning Pathways class. Didn't you set that up on Google Plus? Where you had us it was like you had to do like 17 things a day for 9 days or something.
Yep.
Yeah, tell us about that class.
So that class was created in order to get an idea what a learning pathway could be. Now, Greg makes a good point. The reason I put 17 things a day, wasn't 7, it was like 3.
It was like 3.
3. But the point was, we don't all learn in the same way. So within learning pathways, you have a beginning, and you usually have an end result, which in this day and age is the end of your grade or year or your course. But it's how you get there that's most important. So that's why you had 3 or 17 or however many different ways to get there, to prove that without me trying very hard, I could come up with many different ways to get to a final product. If nothing else today, that's what I really want you to think about. There's not just one way to get to an answer, even though I'm sure you already know that, but it's about actually applying that and how to do it. And the way to do that is to use things, like I said, like the e-portfolios. Or what do you think you would use if you have to try to demonstrate evidence of learning, but you want kids to learn in 3 or 4 different ways, for example? How would you do it? I guess I bring that back to you, because I can tell you answers, but what would you do if you needed to prove that they've learned, but you know that they're going to learn in 3 different ways? So think of your class or your school right now and an example of an activity you want to do, and knowing that there's going to be at least 3 different ways to do it. What would you do?
Maybe provide the students with like a menu. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
A menu? And what grade are you thinking, or what?
I work with 7-12, so student choice, self-centered. You know, what if they have control over what they can do, the better the outcome is going to be. So basically, looking at knowing that it's an equitable choice, but providing them with many opportunities. So either using technology or using an artistic, if they have strengths with artistic ability. I mean, you're talking high-tech, low-tech. It doesn't matter, as long as they are able to show you that they've learned with their outcome, then it definitely has to be something that they feel in control of.
And
So
where would they put that learning?
they could share it out however they choose. They could, you know, if they don't like to present, they can create a Prezi, or they can collaborate with other students, and being able to give them that avenue. It doesn't have to be class time or seat time with me. It could be, you know, on their own, like you said. I mean, I'm if something's due at 12 o'clock, it's 11:55, and I'm submitting it, because that's how I'm processing all that time, and that's how a lot of students work as well. And like you said, when there's not, you compare trust with higher ed and K-12, but that sometimes there's not trust with teachers and students.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no, it's true, yeah.
But it definitely is, we have to let them take hold of it if we're going to hold them accountable for it. So I'm going to go this way.
Any other ideas from the panel?
Yeah.
That's actually one of the things that we're trying to figure out in my district, because we are going competency-based, and they are trying to figure out, well, how are we're still trying to figure out what the competencies are, but how are we going to have them prove this? And we've actually been kind of pairing up with some schools up in Maine, actually, who've been doing this for a long time, and one of the things that they've suggested, or they do at their schools, and they're suggesting that we do, is the kids have to actually prove their learning at the end by actually presenting what they've learned in front of a panel of educators, and they actually have to defend their learning. And the way that they can do that is in any way that they want to. So if they are tech savvy, they can do the online portfolios, they can do presentations, or if they're not tech savvy or they just don't really want to use the technology, they can just do like a regular old school portfolio type of presentation with, you know, your poster boards and all of that, depending on your level of savviness and what you're actually able to get your hands on outside of school. So this is actually something that we are trying to figure out for ourselves. So, you know, actually suggestions would be.
A jury would be, that's an interesting concept. I mean, we've all heard portfolios, we've all heard juries. A lot of work, interesting work with competency-based education is going on in the badging movement. So if you made a badge,
Yeah.
the kids had to link it to evidence. And then, but I wonder if, you know, what if I were to do that, if I were to, you know, unpack different grade level Common Core standards and identify competencies involved and created a badging system around that, though, am I, you know, is it just going to become another assignment by a different name? Or will they, you know, will the kids really be focused on their understanding? But I like that idea of kind of presenting a jury or presenting your work to a jury kind of concept.
Well, with my open badges as well, the reason I'm streaming towards them, I guess you would say, is because I believe that you badge what you don't have. We already have diplomas. We already have certification. We already have a lot in assessment, but you can use badges in your own way. You don't have to make them just specific to outcomes, or as I don't know how you're going to develop criteria for digital citizenship, for example, but open badges give you an opportunity to develop the criteria together as a group, as a district. The students could create their own. There's more opportunities for personalization with open badges than there ever was with like a diploma, a high school diploma. You can't debate that. That is what it is. So when I started to think about badging as just an opportunity to badge what we don't have, which is informal learning, but also all that learning that takes place within the classroom that we're not even getting at, and documenting evidence of and talking about. And but the other thing is that I wanted to think about is we're still being very traditional in that, because we're measuring learning. Everything has to be measured, and so I still want to think about the idea of taking away the measurement and doing kind of what you suggested and getting to the end and just showing what I learned. Like, why does it have to be measured every step of the way and compared to everyone else? So I really like what you said, the idea.
Because it's our job.
We have the Common Core.
Yeah, the taxpayers demand it.
Smarter balance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in Canada we don't. So I guess they defend us and say, well, we're much smaller, so we're like a state, really. The whole country's a state. But it's the idea that how can we be accountable? You're making a very valid point. How can we be credible without just numbers? Like, what can we do to demonstrate that we're learning? Yeah. So I think I'll finish with the gamified project that we just did, which was we worked with grad students in Alaska and grade 9 students in Georgia. And together we examined serious games. And to demonstrate our learning, we used a wiki. And the students went in and they created their own evaluation system of serious games. So they were inundated from Twitter. They created their own social media accounts to ask people, send us games to test out. So the first trial, I would say, because everything's a trial when you're doing an inquiry-based project because you just don't know which direction it's going to go in, was teachers and students had to create separate rubrics, and then they had to decide together what that rubric system would look like. Intergenerational learning is fascinating because everyone comes from their own values, and they couldn't agree necessarily, so we let them be separate. So we had 2 different rubrics originally, and then now if you look on the website, we finally it took months, but we finally came with a set system to evaluate games. Then they evaluated the games, and then they decided all of them, so separated and together, they decided how would we create our own game in Minecraft. And they used the Hunger Games as an example, or like their theme, to create a game. And so students and the grad students created these videos of games that they could make. And then we chose which was the best game. And now we're at a point where they're going to be creating their own game, either in Minecraft or however else they're going to create their game. But I think the winning game was in Minecraft. So they're going to be creating a game. Now, what we learned from this was trying to track all that learning was impossible, almost. However, if you use a tool like Wikispaces, and you have someone like Vicki Davis who's watching it all the time from a learning analytics point of view, the students, the grade 9 students in particular, were split into guilds, so they all had responsibilities within that wiki. And so they'd pass on the learning as it happened, I guess you could say, or they'd pass on the evaluations, because what they've created is a whole encyclopedia of games that any of you can use so that you can go in and check as an educator whether this game is worthwhile or not. So they've got a scale going. But what they noticed was that students were going in and making edits and changes at a rate that she's never seen before in all of her projects that she's ever done. And it was because what they thought of, well, it's our opinion because we haven't done a set research on it. In our opinion, it's because they were accountable to the grad students. The grad students were accountable to the grade 9 students, and everyone was really trying not only just to impress, but to learn and do their best. And by splitting them up into these guilds, which is based on skills, we saw some incredible achievements and learning and passion-based learning that, well, Vicki in particular had never seen before. And Lee Graham, who's up at the grad teacher up in Alaska, she'd never seen before. We also use badges to motivate them. We thought it was an extrinsic motivator tool, and so we didn't really want to do it because we didn't use them as badge what you don't have. We were just trying to get them to do it. What they appreciated about the badges was finally there was clarity, in their opinion, on the criteria of what we meant by tweet this out to the world, or do many evaluations, do as many evaluations of games as you can. Badges gave them set criteria, and teachers in particular really appreciated that. The students, they wanted to create their own badges, so they just did. And so there was no comparison of badges. So it was all different. Anyway, so that's an example.
All right, I think we have to wrap up at this point. We're getting ready for our next one. Good. Thank you so much.
Bye, Verena. And everybody make sure that you either circle, if you're on Google+, circle Verena. She does amazing things there.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good day, guys.